Welcome back on Mode. Today I want to propose you a video about the building, modifying and painting about the Ossiarch Bonereapers, in this case specific one about the Kavalos Deathriders, and the version will be the Crematorians, the Ygnimortoi. So the first thing to see is to cut the pieces from the screw. You have to pay a bit of attention because some of these are a bit delicate, so pay attention about this. And we had to concentrate mainly about the horse one because we had to work on it a bit. And after that we cut everything, pay attention, we have to make one decision. Is that seeing these pieces, you have to notice that the legs are separate, but the basin of the rider is on the horse itself, and we need to cut it off. So we use a bit of blue tack to put everything under, so that we can make that when we use a cutter to take off such basin from the horse itself, we don't have the problem about having that it scatter around, but it's fixed on the blue tack itself. You have to pay attention because you risk to ruin the basin, and eventually about the horse you don't have too much problem because in that case you can use eventually green stuff, something like a plastic glue or milliput to repair eventually it, so it's a bit easier in that way. So we detach the basin from the horse, we do it for both sides of the horse, and then after we have separated this, as you see, we glue the horse parts together, so that after we have done this we can make a second move, so that first we put everything together and then we go to make together the part about the basin. Remember that when you make together the part of the horses, you have to eventually use a fil or so on, so that you can make more easy and more solid the two parts combined. Eventually you can repair, as I said. About the basin, I suggest you to use a bit of blue tack to put the two parts together, so that it's easier because they are quite small, and then glue together. Pay attention because a bit of blue tack can make itself attached when you glue, but you can separate it easy because it's quite morbid and it can be take off quite easy from the mod itself. And now we had to glue the corpse of the rider together. Here I suggest you to use a bit of Patafix to put in position the basin itself that we created, so that then we can glue the legs of the rider to the body itself of the basin. In this way we have the correct angle that we have to use about the legs, so that we can take off and put on the rider itself on the horse without any issue about being too close or too open, and so the mod is much more stable in such a way. So pay attention, and after that we have corrected the legs on such basin, we put the part of the upper body on the model. This is a way to make that the main part of the rider is put together, and then we can paint together these parts. It's up to you. And then we can magnetize the part of the body because we have the weapons that can be changed. So we use a driller to create a hole inside the upper body. In this case you can eventually create the drilling before eventually to glue together. And then we have to pay attention about the vessel to magnetize. About the arms, we can make that we use a bit of Patafix to fix the parts, so that we can cut off what are the parts that are plastic one that was inside the body, and then we take a drill and create a little hole so that it create a way to put and make more fixed the part about the magnet that we'll put inside. Pay attention about, because it's a bit delicate this step, so you have to pay attention about the force that you use to make the drilling. But it's really quite nice about creating something, and here we have the final result. And I'll use a standard as referral. You can see that I use the patafix to put together the two different parts. Here are the parts related, and here you can see how with the magnetize I can change from the blade to the spear, and from the spear eventually to the standard itself, so that I can change and choose which one. It's better also to storage, because otherwise it would be a problem. Here you can see what remained about the parts of the sprue, and here the parts before to go to glue together and paint. So here is the model provisory one that you can find. I think that the standard itself, it's really quite nice to see about having something that you can appreciate and understand better the model. What I use is the Horrek Dreadlance. Eventually you can find the box in the description, because had 2 units of such Kavalos Deathriders, and let me use a lot of different techniques using such. So here we can see the model themselves. I built them partially before to go to paint, and then finish with other visuals. We see also other details that I used for them. And about this, here you can see the Horrek Deathriders in all its really wonderful sight. And here you can see about the final result of the painting. I want to create a Crematorians or Ygnimortoi Legion, and I want to use a different technique compared to the one that I used for the Neferata, because for that one I used too much agas shade. So I want to create a cheaper technique, and so I decided to change a bit my approach to such technique. So I used as usual the black primer of the Vallejo, but it's up to you decide which black primer you want to use. And as highlight, I used the tar brown of the Scarecrow Sanctify. This is quite useful to create an highlight using the brown tone, and it's up to you to use how much the brush you want to create and how much strong you want to be the highlight itself on such model. And then after that I done this, I move to paint the skulls, and you can paint the ride and the horse itself, because you have to use the same technique for both parts. I used to start with the entire thread of the Scarecrow 75, but you can use other technique eventually, but I'll create a video about other techniques that you can use to paint with the same result, because I find it quite interesting. And I use this as base for these schools and so on to make understandable. And after this I use the technique of the mid-tones color. So I use the entire thread of the Scarecrow 75 and some yellow of the Vallejo to create a step-by-step movement on highlight. It's that you decide how many midtones you want to use. Remember that you have to decrease each time the surface that you need to paint, so that you can make the highlight and decide how much you want that it can be seen. And the final step are done with the pure sun yellow. Remember that you need eventually only some tip or some little lines and so on, but you have to decide how much you want to create the middle tones and when you reach the final result, because you can make, for example, a point of white at the end or so on. It's up to you how make, but you need only a single mid-tone to have anyway a really nice effect using the difference of colors, so it's nice. And then I used to paint the horse the 2x brown of the Scarecrow 75, so that I was able with that brown that I used before to create yet a difference from the highlight and the shadowing. Then I moved to another part. So I used to paint the shield and metallic part using the temperature of the citadel. In this way I was able to use a color that I like as metallic, and it's not so bright, and it's for such that I really like a lot. And then I used the violet of the scale color 75 to paint that bar, the inner part of the shield where there are the sigils and so on, but you can use other colors. And I want to use this also for the standard self, also that used for such part, because the master of the model is covered, and so I wanted to create something that it was homogeneous with few color to use. And then I used the Victorian brush of the scale color 75 to paint the details, because I want something that it was not so shiny as the gold, but at the same time that it gave the idea of metallic. And then I used the agate shade to create those shadow on the model. It's up to you decide how much you want to use, but you have to cover the model without going on the squeeze. Anyway, you can play with the Dubai Brown and the Aglax so that you can make a game of the highlights and so on. It's up to you when to stop. I simply use little passages to create such final step that I really like. And then I use the Racket Flash to paint the bandage, for example, for the spears and so on, because I need something that it was a good way to make a different light about, to use again the Dookie Violet. This it was used for the tabar to combine, for the armor, and I used this in the way that it was useful also for the blending of everything together, and I used this also for the bandages and the part of the spears and blades, so that everything was using a little few color. And I used the sunset part of the scale color 75 to create a sort of highlight on the tabar itself, but it's up to you to decide if you want to use the tank of the midtones also here, or simply put a light color and then so having that you can see the movement of the tabar itself, but it's up to you. And after I've done this, I use the Dookie Violet to blend the tabar together so that the light and the shadow was reinforced and homogeneous blended together. So I repeat how much you want to play with this. Then I used this, the Victorian brass, to create again an highlight using this for the roof, so that I was able to create the contour of the roofs of the horse, so that it was able to be used to create a different part. And the XV77 of the citadel to create about the wood part of the shield. It's up to you decide how much. And the bloody red of the Vallejo to create an highlight about the gems that are for the model, both for the hooves and the internal part. And the fuchsia of the scale color 35 instead to create a coloring of the sigils themselves. Remember that it's up to you decide how much you want to paint them, but there are really small tips to use to make them highlight. And Dookie Violet to blend everything together, the armor and the internal part of such sigils. Then I use the something matte of the left color, but you can use other options to cover everything about the model so that I can't ruin the model moving and so on. So I think that it's really quite useful to use. And then it's time to glue everything together. So I put the head of the horse on the horse itself, and I decided not to create the base before to put the model, but to put the model on the base, because I had idea that you see in other videos about the final result for such models. Then so assemble all the model about the horse in the way that it was complete, and only after I finished about the horse I moved on the ride itself. And about the ride itself, here I suggest you to use before the shield on the model, because the head it's a bit more difficult to combine, so that once that you put the shield on the model, you simply have to put the head in the direction that you prefer without have any problem. About the other arm, remember that it's magnetized, so it's you decide which one you want eventually. I really like such effect because in this way I can detach the ride itself from the horse and interchange the various weapons that I can have and I can use, and I really like. About different type of colors, I create a separate video about that make you understand how much it can be nice such ones. So from Dino Mode it's everything. I invite you to put a like on this video, to subscribe to the channel, to ring the bell, and to comment this video if you are interested in something about this video or you want to suggest me some arguments for other videos. I hope to see you again to the next time.